Welcome to the Thursday, August 5th edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by WinBet. I'm Joe Bartle, filling in for John McKechnie, who I think is dealing with some pretty serious water damage here at his apartment. So I'm happy that we were able to kind of find a quick solution to that. But I'm happy to be joined alongside with you, Mario, who will actually be doing SiriusXM with for tomorrow as well too. So it's kind of like a precursor for us of sorts.
Yeah, thanks for stepping in for John. It's pretty weird. John had his apartment today flooding from above, and I don't know what exactly happened. Apparently some empty unit had a toilet that got flushed somehow, and somehow that flooded John's apartment beneath it. I don't know how that worked, but it's pretty weird because it was only like 2 or 3 months ago that happened to me also in my current apartment, where in this very room that I'm recording from at like 3 a.m. one day, water just started coming through the ceiling, and I had no idea what was going on with that. So I just I called the emergency maintenance, and they didn't answer for like 20 plus minutes. So like, all right, that's it. I'm calling 911. And I called the fire department because I was like, I don't know what to do about this, but somebody's got to get this water to stop, or I'm gonna, I don't even know, raise some kind of hell. And it turned out it wasn't like a water pipe bursting, or it wasn't a scenario like John's. Somehow some girl in the room above mine passed out while we don't have tubs, we only have showers, and she managed to pass out in her shower with the water running and sat on the drain so that she flooded her entire apartment and never woke. I don't know if she must have been like on some kind of pill or something,
right?
Knocked herself out pretty much, and like flooded her entire apartment with her shower running for I don't know how long that takes, probably like 2+ hours, I would imagine. It was not like the faucet running, it was the shower head,
right?
And anyway, yeah, so quite a bad stretch for the water damage category for the RotoWire crew here in 2021.
And kind of weird situations too. That's incredible.
Yeah, and like I didn't know what the hell was going on, and like I assumed like a water pipe just burst up there and no one was home, and the firefighters just like some girl was sitting on her drain. Like how do you do that? How do you sit that precisely on a drain and not budge? How do you not tip over when you're sitting there zonked out on whatever it is? It's like sounds like she almost drowned up there or something, which I'm glad didn't happen. But
I'm just happy you're not
for that, or said thank you for getting firemen to wake me up before I made a watery tomb for myself.
They probably can't reveal who tipped her off. I mean, if she's somehow listening to this Thursday edition of the RotoWire podcast, she might have an idea.
She should have guessed where that water went.
I suppose. I'm just happy you're not dunking on her for sitting in the shower, because I that's probably revealing too much. But I sometimes sit in the shower, and I know people think it's a really weird habit.
I can understand like someone gets a headache or something, especially that makes sense to me. The part about sitting exactly on the drain,
right, the drain,
and covering all of it, and then not waking up or budging for hours. That's the part that I will never understand. But anyway, everything worked out. I frantically grabbed all my stuff and threw it out of the way of the water falling in, and we had to have a big stupid fan in here for a couple days, but oh well.
So is that one of those scenarios where you've now learned what's most important in your life because you grabbed X, Y, and Z before whatever else you were supposed to be grabbing?
Luckily, it was just contained in this room, so I didn't have to actually do the full inventory.
Prioritize.
It was more like reverse whack-a-mole. Like the water was coming down, and I would just like try to move things out of the way of it, and more water would spring over here, and then respond to it as fast as I can. It was a good, I guess, like exercise, a good drill, a nice little wake up terrified and think without thinking, react without thinking. Good little drill for me. Then I guess the next time she falls asleep on the drain with the water running.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Yeah. And great for you guys listening to find out the plumbing situation of both John and Mario. I thankfully have not ran into that
Somebody's next
scenario. Well, that's what I'm saying. Now I feel like
will get flooded now. Yeah.
It's got to be me, right? There's the connection I'm filling in. So therefore I'm going to be prone for this to occur as well.
I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. That's all I'll say.
All right. Well, we have plenty on tap for today. A lot of news. Of course, there is the first preseason game taking place today. We are pro not talking about the NFL Hall of Fame preseason game, thankfully. So not a lot of conversation.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, exactly. we ignore that altogether. But a lot of other news and notes to go. We'll maybe even look over the job battle series that you've kind of started on the site itself. Before we do that, let's get a word from our sponsors, WinBet. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WinBet, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WinBet is now exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast, and WinBet brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Well, you can just head to WinBet's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, or even slam the slots. WinBet is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WinBet, the possibilities are limitless, and WinBet is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download winbet.com. Download WinBet. That's WYNNBET. WinBet, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. Cool. Let's get into a little bit of the news and notes for today. And really, I think the first bit of news is that Kenny Golladay actually occurred yesterday or around that point. Is expected to miss 2 to 3 weeks with a hamstring injury. I'm not sure how aggressive you were getting Kenny Golladay anyway. I listened to all your guys' podcasts, and you're obviously one of our better follows on Twitter too. There's a lot of great people on Twitter for RotoWire. Not me, but certainly you. And I haven't heard you talk much about Kenny Golladay. Does this 2 to 3 week window change anything for you in his rankings?
Not really, but there's some, I guess, concerning stuff coming out of Giants training camp. It sounds like a mess. Jason Garrett still has a job with the team, of course. That's not
Coach
good.
Jason Garrett. What are you talking about?
I kind of forgot about that until that little blurb came up today. And it's like, it kind of reminds me of in Arrested Development. Okay, so for anyone listening who didn't see, Jason Garrett was saying to the media, like, you got to call me coach. That's the way we do it. And it was kind of weird. Like he was trying to kind of like affirm himself as like this new alpha kind of persona, which of course he didn't really carry in the past. And it kind of reminds me of Arrested Development when Tobias, to prove how much he isn't a never nude anymore, walks around the house naked for like days in a row in front of everybody in the middle of the day. It kind of reminds me of that, where it's like, come on, man, we know you're still a never nude. Knock it off. No, we're not calling you coach. You're Jason Garrett.
I think calling him Jason Garrett is probably just we're being overly polite, right? I mean, I don't even know what his role within he's the offensive coordinator, right? Or listed around there.
It's gonna be just like a running joke now. Everyone's gonna say like Coach Jason Garrett. Yes. Ha ha ha. Yeah, right. Which whatever. I guess it doesn't really matter. He doesn't seem like a bad guy or anything. It's just kind of funny that he felt the need to, I don't know, prove that he's a badass to the media. It's like they don't care, and they're never going to stop making fun of you either.
Right. So with Golladay being injured, I guess I moved him down my rankings because I have to we're doing the Yahoo rankings now. I haven't seen where the link goes, but a couple of us, like Jim Coventry and a few others, do live rankings every single week on Yahoo, and it gets updated throughout the offseason and the regular season. Golladay was a guy that I had, I think, around like pick 60 to 75 in that range. And I bumped him down about 10 or 12 spots. I'd have to look exactly where he ends up going. But I thought I loved Golladay with the Lions. Now with Daniel Jones, the quarterback, there's a few other pass catchers there. We don't know if Saquon Barkley will or will not be ready for the regular season, but he's going to be more of a factor than anything Detroit was from a rushing game perspective. I think this all really kind of is a downside for Golladay, who's a good player, just in a tough spot, and now also missing time.
Yeah, I know this sounds like a cop-out to say it, and oftentimes it is, but I think Golladay is ideally drafted in best ball, and I don't mean that because I'm saying like, oh, I don't know if he's going to be any good, and this way it's less risky. I mean, he should be good at certain times. It's just going to be difficult to tell when, especially because he's a downfield, or I would imagine anyway, he'll be kind of downfield oriented. He'll be their overall number one receiver, of course, but I don't think he's going to get much in the way of like 4-yard drag routes and things like that. He's going to be a pretty high average depth of target player. And the further downfield your depth of target is, the easier it is to run into just bad luck on a few targets here and there. It's further downfield. The less accurate quarterbacks struggle to hit those throws. Even good quarterbacks sometimes struggle to hit those throws. So he's got a higher difficulty with a lot of his routes. And when you factor in Daniel Jones's inaccuracy and Jason Garrett and the general issues with that team, you could imagine Galladay falling flat even in what should be a good lineup, a good matchup. And you could also, in my opinion, imagine him having a good game against what should have been a tougher defense because he's kind of a jump ball guy. He doesn't really need to get open to be effective. So good coverage doesn't, I think, get a defense as much against a guy like him as it does someone who actually needs to create separation. So it's just going to be, you either need to have like the discipline to leave him in your lineup, no matter how bad Daniel Jones looked last week. And even if he goes like 2 catches for 25 yards on 7 targets, you have to just keep Galladay in your lineup because you won't know when he's going to have that, the ball bounce the right way, and then he just blows up with no real notice. So in best ball, you don't have to think about that stuff. It's just not a problem of yours after you draft him. But in redraft, it's you probably just want to leave him in your lineup and accept that there might be some ugly weeks just due to the quarterback that he's catching passes from.
Is he the Giants pass catcher you're most likely to roster in bunches? I mean, they have a lot of guys, but also a lot of
Yeah,
question
I'm
marks
not
with
really
those
getting
guys.
much. It's pretty much just Galladay and Shepard for me. I like Darius Slayton as a player, but I don't think there's room in the offense for him, and it seems like they're screwing with his snap count to make room for Tony, who I think just
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's like they should have gotten rid of at least one of Sterling Shepard or Evan Ingram because those two and Kadarius Toney need to run in the same part of the field, and Shepard can play a little bit outside. So if it comes down to Slayton or Shepard losing a rep because they want to get Tony on the field, I think it's going to be Slayton, even though I happen to think he's pretty good. So I'm not able to draft him no matter how cheap he is. Sterling Shepard, I pick here and there. Ideally more in like point per reception leagues because even though I think Shepard's good, Tony does probably get in his way a little bit, and Jones is never going to be a good passer. So I don't think there's going to be touchdowns really, but I can imagine Shepard having a lot of like 5 catches for 70 yards kinds of games.
Okay, that's fair enough, and I've found myself doing the same thing. I like Slayton in best ball formats for the potential, and I thought he kind of has the best connection with Daniel Jones. But when you say best connection with Daniel Jones, that almost means nothing, right? I mean, like when that's
Yeah,
not a very good quarterback who's throwing you the ball. I don't feel like it makes it like a value point for it. So that's the only guy I end up tending to
I
draft,
like
especially with Galladay
Slayton.
now.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
Slayton gets targets, I think he'll do pretty well. It's just I worry that as a former 5th round pick, he's going to be politically basically like marginalized while they try to force something that isn't even going to be there, in my opinion, with Kadarius Toney.
okay. Sticking in the NFC East, there was a report earlier today, again Thursday. Miles Sanders has struggled with drops and ball security at training camp thus far. Of course, they drafted Kenneth Gainwell. They signed Kerryon Johnson, re-signed Jordan Howard. Boston Scott's still around. There's a pretty deep running back depth chart with the Eagles. And then you also have to consider it appears the Eagles are close to acquiring Deshaun Watson at some point. It seemed likely or almost a guaranteed as of last night. And now I feel like we've seen a
I
few
mean, we'll
reports
see.
like
I mean, it's hard.
Ben Albright kind of walked it
There
back
some of
earlier
the,
today.
well, some of the reports, it's just I wouldn't go taking anything for reliable on this question unless we get it from I don't know, probably someone like Jay Glazer, I guess. Obviously, someone like Schefter will eventually be on it, but right now it's Houston's too weird a team. Philadelphia's too weird of a team. They're both going to be screwing with media, trying to get some reporter to bite on something or other. Slash, we don't know. There could just be people screwing with these reporters. It's hard to
Sure.
know exactly. People have a lot of from a lot of different angles have reason to put out misinformation. So, but yeah, it's been out there for a while that for months even I want to say that the Eagles were. I guess it used to be the Eagles and the Panthers traded for Darnold, and so now it just seems to be just the Eagles bidding on Watson. And I don't know if I
Where are
expect
the
it to
Dolphins in
happen
this
soon.
equation? The Dolphins should be in this equation too,
I
is
don't
what I
think they
thought.
care. I think they're going
Okay.
with Tua. I mean, I think Tua will be fine. I actually predicted it like 4 months ago or whatever that the Dolphins would be the team to trade for Watson, but that was before Watson's off-field issues came up. I don't think Miami. It's too risky for a situation where they already might have their answer at quarterback. So,
Hmm.
though in Philadelphia's case, I mean, the whole thing is hard to figure out even if they trade for Deshaun Watson, they might not be able to play him this year. He might get like suspended all season or something.
That's why
So
you have Joe
Jalen Hurts could
Flacco.
still start. Well, I don't even think that they'll necessarily trade Hurts to get Watson, even if
Okay.
this happens, because I mean, Houston already has Davis Mills, and I think he sucks, but a lot of teams probably don't. And Houston being a bad team, in my opinion, it makes sense if they do like Davis Mills. So whatever, there's no way to know what Houston's thinking. Houston could just be trying to tank pretty much. I mean, that's why they signed so many 1 year contracts. I saw people being like, "Oh, they're so stupid. Don't they know that 1 year contracts end after a year?" It's like, yeah, they're trying to run up the number of contracts that they lose in free agency so they can get compensatory draft picks. Like, it's pretty obvious they're looking forward a year rather than trying to compete in 2021. But it's hard to tell. I think they're planning to go with Tyrod either way. I know Jalen Hurts is the more recent prospect, and I happen to like Jalen Hurts in some respects, but I'm not convinced he beats out Tyrod Taylor or Davis Mills for a starting role. So I've been off Hurts all off season. I can't figure out what that team is doing, and the things that I do think are plainly apparent are all really bad looking to me. So I just don't want to deal with it. But yeah, I guess, until this Watson thing blows over, the people who are already invested in Hurts might want to just kind of hold off for a week or something like that before taking on more shares of him.
Well, okay, so let's put this in context of the other skill guys in that same orbit
Oh,
with
sorry.
Hurts
To go
and
back,
Watson.
yeah, to go
No,
to
no,
go
no,
back
it's
a little
okay.
bit, like Miles Sanders. No, I should have said Miles Sanders is the starting running back. They're not going to bench him. The concern that I think is more valid is that, yeah, he is a natural receiver, and he's always been bad about fumbles. That was the case coming out of Penn State. It was the case, especially early in his rookie year before he had that hot stretch in the final 8-10 weeks, whatever it was. Last year, he dropped passes. He saw his pass catching production totally fall off a cliff. Shocked at how much the fall off was, even though I thought he was overrated going into last year. He's never going to be good at that, or at least he'll never be as natural at it as certainly someone like Kenneth Gainwell, who I liked a lot. I think he's as good as Michael Carter, but I don't know what they're planning on between Sanders, who should be unchallenged as the main runner. But I don't know what they're thinking in passing downs with Boston Scott, carry on, Kenneth Gainwell. No idea what to make of it. All I know is I don't really want much to do with it. But if the Eagles are competitive in games, Miles Sanders should get carries, and for whatever other limitations he has, he's pretty clearly a good pure runner. Like, if you just give him the ball, give him the field to work with, there's not that many running backs that are more dangerous than Sanders. It's just he's not as good at the fundamental details as some of these other guys, especially when it comes to just holding onto the ball, obviously. So I am staying away from Sanders, but it's not because I'm worried about him getting benched. I'm worried the Eagles are going to be bad this year, and they might need to throw the ball more than they planned on. And if I guess the more they throw it, the worse for Sanders, or so we have reason to fear.
Okay, and if they get Watson, does that change your outlook on Sanders at all? If Watson's able to play,
I have no idea.
there's a lot of question
Right?
marks.
Yeah. I mean, if Watson plays, he's probably going to be really good. I mean, I don't know what to make of. There's no precedent for us to look at. There's nothing.
No kidding.
We can't look at some past historical case and be like, well, the last time it worked out like this. There's no last time. Probably won't be another time after this. Don't know which way it's going to break, but if Watson's out there, even with a bad offense around him, you would expect a pretty huge gap between him and whatever standard of play Jalen Hurts would provide. So that would be good for Sanders.
I haven't heard you and John's opinion enough on Rager, who you guys were obviously really high on last year, and now Devonta Smith. I mean, just an overall from a pass catching perspective for the Eagles, regardless if it's Hurts or Watson, if they are a bad team and they're going to have to pass more, you would think that would then benefit Smith and Rager as guys that could be able to make some value on their current ADPs.
Maybe. I haven't drafted any shares of. I maybe took a Smith share back like a month or two ago, but I'm definitely off now. I wasn't targeting him in general, even though I thought Devontae Smith was going to clearly lead that team in targets. I was totally concerned about the quality of those targets, and because I was out on Smith, I was also out on Rager, even though I still like Rager. A lot of the criticisms of Rager, in my opinion, are total hyperbole. I don't know what to make of his recent kind of personal ish struggles. It's not good to see as as sympathetic as easy it is to be sympathetic toward Rager, it's not good for fantasy projections to have all this stuff that he's got to worry about clouding his mind when he already has to deal with what could be a difficult task playing for this team that I think is going to be quite bad this year. I like Rager a lot as a prospect, but it's not as if I ever liked him because I thought he was so polished as a receiver or so reliable. To me, I was more into Rager because of the upside that he has and because the way I would design an offense, I could definitely have a use for a player like Rager because I want to make the safeties sit back. I want to create room for the run, and I want to use the run to get the safeties leaning forward, set them up with play action, and kind of. I would probably run like a more up tempo, slightly more spread out version of what the Titans do, basically. So I could use a player like Rager because he is extremely explosive and he can run after the catch. And if your fundamental defense, doesn't account for him, he can make you pay with the home run every time. And I want that home run threat in my offense. It's something I would really insist on having. So I like Rager a lot for those reasons, for the real life reasons, but especially when it became apparent that the Eagles were looking at the possibility of going with Hurts all year. I just was too low on Hurts as a passer to see it as a good situation for Rager because Smith will get more targets. Smith is super polished, whereas Rager is more toolsy and kind of raw. Smith is probably older than Rager even now, or at least he's not much younger if he is. So Smith is super polished, gets a lot of the targets. That's what you need for fantasy. I was worried about Rager being kind of like a decoy slash big play specialist in a run heavy offense that didn't throw the ball especially well.
You were dead on. Smith is actually older by 2 months.
So, I happen to, the way I look at the game, the way I look at prospects, I don't do this thing where people are like, oh, I saw 5 snaps from this rookie and he dropped 2 passes in them. He sucks. He was a bust last year at ADP. He sucks now. He's dust. Like, I don't understand what compels people to think that way. He's a young prospect who needed development time. Prospects always go, or almost always go, on a certain development trajectory. And the younger they are, the more productive they are at younger ages, the more athletic tools they have to work with. These are all reasons to give sort of leniency in their development time because they're working it out and they have all this stuff to work with to maybe figure it out with a little more wisdom, a little more time to work on their craft. But yeah, there's all these people who are like, oh, a 21-year-old player who, by the way, was playing through, what was it, like a busted shoulder and a torn ligament in his thumb or something like that. Rager was playing hurt a lot last year. He had 2 nasty injuries that he came back from like 3 weeks earlier than what the initial prognosis was. So yeah, dealing with that and Carson Wentz and the offensive line falling apart, I'm not really inclined to look at Rager's rookie year and be like, oh, what a turd he is because he didn't do well in that situation. It's like nobody did well in that situation except Travis Fulgham for 2 games.
Right. I think that's fair, and especially if you have concern about Hurts, I think that's probably a different podcast altogether. Like what the value of Hurts and where other people stand on them is going to be interesting, and one of those stories to follow.
If you got him in Dynasty or something, just sell him because
and you did in our Dynasty league.
He's not. Right, yeah. I mean, he can make it work in a certain kind of offense, but it takes a certain coach committed to running the ball with the quarterback. And I'm just skeptical that he's ever going to get that situation. And if you try to make him throw the ball 36 times a game, he's just not good enough at passing to hold up with that level of exposure, in my opinion.
Okay, fair enough. There's a couple other news that happened today that I wanted to at least get your opinion on, Mara. Before we do that, a word from our sponsors, Dynasty Owner. Are you tired of the same old fantasy football leagues that get canceled after a year or so? Yeah, well, if that's the case, Dynasty Owner has your back. Go to dynastyowner.com. New leagues for the 2021 season are forming now. Dynasty Owner unites the fun and excitement of fantasy football with the skill and strategy of the front office by incorporating a salary cap and real NFL player salaries for diehard fantasy football fans that want the real GM experience. Dynasty Owner adds a whole new level of strategy in that element. Are you worried you won't be able to find anyone to play in a league with? Well, just don't. I mean, Dynasty Owner's got you covered and will help fill your league with fantasy football enthusiasts like yourself. You won't have to worry about finding enough players. You can choose to start a league, join an existing one, or purchase a team from a previous owner. If you're serious about joining the big leagues, go to dynastyowner.com and start your dynasty today. Jerry Donaby and I are both in an expert one. I enjoyed it a little bit last year. They probably emphasized the kickers too much, that you actually have to start essentially 2 kickers, which I don't like, but otherwise it's a lot of fun, and I do enjoy that format. So definitely one of our good partners out there, and check them out at dynastyowner.com. The other bit of news that occurred today that I wanted to discuss was Rondale Moore exiting practice early. It's with an undisclosed injury. It's not believed to be serious, but I feel like We've heard that before with a couple of these guys, and then it turned out to be a little bit more. In the context of both AJ Green and Christian Kirk on the injured list right now, this was supposed to be Rondale Moore's time to shine. And I've heard a lot of people say once Moore got a chance to be in the starting lineup, the Cardinals couldn't take him out. Well, now here you go. He's hurt. And this could be a possibility for Andy Isabella to finally get a few more reps and make a resurgence in that lineup. Where do you stand in the Cardinals pass catchers altogether, and your thoughts, regardless of Moore and Green and Kirk's health?
Well, it's something that I think is a bit fluid still. I don't think the Cardinals need to go with any sort of definite based offense. I think they're going to let AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore compete in training camp. I don't think Andy Isabella is, I mean, if he's even on the team, he's not going to play a whole lot. He doesn't really fit Kingsbury's all curl route offense. But Isabella can make plays downfield if there is such an offense. To be fair to Kingsbury, I guess they're talking about using Andy Isabella more so outside this year. They were using him a lot in the slot last year and trying to make him run over the middle on these short routes, and he was never going to be good at that. That's not how you use a player like Isabella. You got to send him downfield. If you're going to insist that he play the slot, then make him run far downfield at least. Don't give him short routes. But I guess if they're going to keep him outside, he can at least be like a speed decoy threat out there. And Isabella isn't trash or anything. It's just he has certain limitations, and the Cardinals have asked him to take on too much exposure in the areas where he's limited. So with that said, I don't see why he would play much this year. I guess if one of those top three guys is hurt, then maybe then. But I don't see much in the way of fantasy potential. I think he'll be a low target per snap kind of player, even if he's efficient with his targets. So I think what we're going to see is, this team, maybe four wide isn't its base formation, but it's pretty close. It's like its second, I would imagine, most frequent formation at worst. If in that case, the three wide would be the most frequent. So there's going to be a lot of reps to split up, even after DeAndre Hopkins and his, of course, giant share of the target rotation. But it's something like, AJ Green's 32, whatever he is now, and he's had his injury troubles. So guy like him, a guy like Christian Kirk, I suppose, both have somewhat elevated durability concern. Even Rondale Moore got hurt at least two of the past. No, he got hurt both of the last 2 years at Purdue, if I remember right. So sometimes these things work themselves out just because, each of the three only plays 14 games and they all kind of get their moment in the offense. But if they all stay healthy and you're looking at the most likely base formation, I think it's just Kirk and Moore both play a lot. There's going to be a lot of double slot formations, be it trips or just four wide. And if they're both on the field, at that point, I just kind of start thinking about what the route combinations are going to look like. We're going to still have probably DeAndre Hopkins mostly on the left side. Maybe Kirk switches that, maybe Cliff switches that up a little bit this year. Last year, he pretty much only had Hopkins running on the left side and running kind of like 8-yard routes on the left side with a few exceptions each game. If that keeps happening, then obviously none of these other guys are going to be running on the left side or underneath all that much. So from the slot, you're talking about Kirk versus Moore. These are both really good prospects, I think, and people have forgotten what a good prospect Christian Kirk was, specifically as a slot receiver, and specifically how the things that make Moore interesting from a production standpoint at Purdue also are positives for Christian Kirk. Like, they were both remarkable for how good their true freshman seasons were. Like, Christian Kirk kind of had a Rondale Moore like true freshman year at Texas A&M that people have since forgot about. But when he was playing outside at the right receiver spot last year, that was him playing out of position. He should have been in the Larry Fitzgerald role the whole time. So it's one thing to observe Christian Kirk failed somewhat at right outside receiver. It's not tantamount to the observation that he failed in the slot or is likely to fail in the slot. He's more likely to succeed in the slot, or at least if you think Rondale Moore is likely to succeed in the slot, the exact same reasoning would apply to Kirk. So I see that one splitting up on the trait basis, which is to say Rondale Moore being fast runs further downfield generally, or at least the downfield routes that there are to split up between the two of them, Moore gets most of them. Kirk probably does more of the technician stuff underneath, and especially in the intermediate. If you're talking underneath targets for Moore, I'm thinking mostly jet sweeps and screens. I don't think he's going to take the same part of the field that Kirk will. Like, Kirk should be uniquely good underneath, intermediate, and in the middle of the field, whereas Moore can offer more for the offense going deep, having, the 4.27 speed or whatever it is. So I kind of see Moore running from the slot, splitting the slot workload pretty much evenly, not evenly, but I, something where Kirk is basically more present than most people are expecting. But I can see it working out for both of them, especially again if AJ Green keeps having injury troubles or if it just turns out he's not very good. In that scenario, where they don't have AJ Green, then Rondale I think just goes outside. Or I could be wrong, but it's like he can run those routes that Kirk can't outside. Like Kirk doesn't really have the speed to run downfield the way that they might want that outside right receiver spot to go. So I think there's a way for everybody to pitch in here. My main takeaway though, looking at like the ADP right now, is I think Moore's going too high because I don't see how we reliably separate the projections of Moore or Kirk or Green. To me, it's kind of they're pretty close to each other, and Moore probably costs 3 rounds earlier than Kirk and 4 rounds earlier than AJ Green, or at least that's how most leagues I've been in have gone.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. So Kirk's ADP on NFFC formats within the last 5 days, so like August 1st to now, Kirk is at 191. Guys around him in that range, Terrace Marshall, John Brown, Paris Campbell, all taken a little before within that same round. Emmanuel Sanders, Traquan
Before?
Smith. Yeah, Terrace Marshall, John Brown, Paris Campbell, Shepard, all before Christian Kirk. And then
So for
Emmanuel.
what it's worth, that's the opposite of so with the ADP I was talking about. I guess I should have just said it's underdog. Like on there, I
Okay.
know he goes like 2 rounds before Kirk. Well, probably like 3 or 4 rounds before Paris Campbell. So that's interesting. The NFFC ADP appears to be quite divergent, and in that scenario,
Well,
I
Moore
actually would
is
be
ahead of
interested.
Kirk. Moore is ahead of
Right.
Kirk.
Sorry. Even Terrace Marshall, he's going like
Okay.
a round or two later than Kirk than Rondale Moore is on underdog. So I was just talking about how I wouldn't really want Moore at his current ADP. I guess I got to take that back. On an NFFC ADP, I would be interested in more in that range.
Okay. Because Moore is at 174, which is about a round higher than Kirk. Guys before Moore are Aguilar, Elijah Moore, Bateman, Henry Ruggs, Cole Beasley. Again, that's within the last 5 days. I mean, like if I'm looking at those names, I agree with you. I think there's an upside play out of Rondale Moore from that section. You can, I mean, the Aguilar pick is like a boring one that, okay, fine. And I know Bateman's been getting a lot of buzz, but I think with that Arizona
Yeah,
offense, I'm okay with Moore.
Yeah, sorry, I would definitely take Rondale over Aguilar. That's one. Those
Okay.
guys go like 3 rounds apart on underdog, and Aguilar goes easily later always. So that's interesting that the markets are so different between those two sites. I guess I don't know what they're thinking really. I mean, I guess it's just different opinions and the two
I mean,
different.
the scoring system's different. It's full point PPR and NFFC, whereas I think it's
That
half
would
point for
suit
underdog, right?
more. Yeah, I would think the point PPR would sooner hurt Rondale more, or at least certainly not be
True.
an advantage relative to these other guys. So I don't. It's seems like NFFC people are a little lower on him, I guess, than the underdog. The best ball format might explain some of it too. Like maybe
True.
people on best ball are thinking, "Oh, Rondale's going to be super inconsistent," but that doesn't quite seem to be what they believe. They seem to more so believe on underdog, like he's the wide receiver 2 in this offense because AJ Green sucks and Christian Kirk sucks, and that line of thinking I definitely reject. I am pretty sure Christian Kirk doesn't suck. And even though it's more likely in the case of AJ Green, I don't think we should be so sure that he sucks either.
Okay, cool. I want curious. Like I've heard you talk about the underdog best balls quite a bit. How many shares do you have thus far in underdog, and like what's the end game goal by the end of August?
How many shares do I have of Rondale?
No, I meant like how many drafts have you done on underdog?
Oh, I think I've done something like 20 or something like that.
That was my thought.
I don't have I don't have any Rondale shares. I have a lot of Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's on probably like 40% of my teams or more, which I'm not afraid to take more exposure there. I'm pretty sure the people doubting Kirk are wrong to do it.
Do you think you're going to get to like 35, 40 underdog drafts by the end
I
of
don't
this?
know.
Or
We'll see. So the ADP sure seems to be tightening up, in my opinion, and or at least in some points. Like Jonathan Taylor's going way too late. That's stupid. Some like DeAndre Swift's going too late. That's stupid too. But it's harder drafting now. Maybe like the Akers injury and the Michael Thomas injury have had something to do with this. But there's just a lot more picks, especially if I'm remembering right, in kind of like the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round range, where I'm getting on the clock and I'm like, God, this sucks. I don't want any of these players. Whereas when I was drafting earlier, I usually was like, yeah, I know what I want to do. I know what I'm doing here. This is going to work. I find myself being stressed out and pissed off a lot more often on the clock right now. So if that keeps happening, and if I keep getting out of these drafts and basically feeling like I didn't even get like an advantage in that draft, maybe I'll just close up shop. But then again, if Taylor keeps falling against my better judgment, I'll probably be compelled to keep drafting.
All right, yeah. So don't reveal any further because I do want your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor and the Colts offense as a whole. But first, we got a word from our sponsors. Auto New Fantasy Football lets you build your fantasy football dynasty like a real GM. It's better fantasy football, auction-based, deep rosters, and you can include college player prospects. Stash the next rookie of the year while he's still tearing it up on Saturdays. You also trade for superstars to make a championship push, develop a team over multiple years, play against the best fantasy football competition on the internet. Just visit OTTONEU.com. I'm in 2 different Auto New leagues. I really like them from a auction-based keeper perspective, and the college prospect part really makes things intriguing. It's been a lot of fun to play in those, and I think that's a format out there that doesn't get enough coverage. So that's my spiel on Auto New. Not, obviously we have reads with them and partners. I like them quite a bit too. And we also have a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Okay, so thanks, Blue Wire, for chipping in there. I do, again, Mario, want to get your take on the Jonathan Taylor situation. So for everyone, I'm sure all the fantasy podcasts right now are kind of talking about the same thing. We had conversations, I think Jake and I did on Tuesday, about Jonathan Taylor and the Colts as well, too. So the backdrop, Carson Wentz out 5 to 12 weeks, the ridiculously large timetable for the injuries, comically notwithstanding, going to make some question marks with Jacob Eason possibly starting at quarterback for the Colts. Maybe they go in a different direction. You look at the waiver wire or free agency, I should say. Not a lot of guys out there. Trading wise, not a lot of guys out there. It seems more like that Jacob Eason has to be your starter for the Colts week 1. Then you have Quentin Nelson having a similar injury to Carson Wentz, also out 5 to 12 weeks. Nelson comes out on his Instagram, says, I'll be back in week 1, no problem. Rah, I'm a tough offensive lineman, yada, yada. This has now made Jonathan Taylor, who was, I thought, a slam dunk 5 or 6 overall running back, go outside of the first round. And I just spoke with Scott Pianowski on SiriusXM today, and then we had him on for the podcast yesterday, and he was like pounding the table. No way am I taking Taylor within the first round. Where do you stand, Mario?
He was actually falling even before those events happened, and now that he is falling, or sorry, now that those things happened, he's falling even more. I don't care at all. I think that people are still confused about what kind of player Jonathan Taylor is, and we're still plagued by this sort of fantasy analysis that really decontextualizes everything and just looks at PPR points and targets per snap and things like that. And like, a target's much more valuable than a carry, so any running back that doesn't project for 70 targets doesn't have enough upside to be worth taking. And I think that reasoning is buttressed by a lot of ideological tenets that are totally arbitrary and that I definitely reject. I have no patience for a lot of that stuff, and I think that there's kind of like an underlying there's like a resulting confusion from this underlying sort of reasoning that's become so popular in so-called analytics sort of media, where because this emphasis of the target and this idea that the running back, the running game doesn't matter, they don't see the difference between one runner and another. They just say they both don't matter. If one is great and one is good, to me that doesn't matter because I think neither is legitimate. That's just how this reasoning tends to go in practice, in my opinion. It's why you get a person like this, like Kevin Cole was saying today, like I just wouldn't have drafted Nick Chubb in any scenario because I don't want to have to deal with the scenario of him being good and having to pay him later. It's like, that's insane. You don't pass on a great player because they cost money later, especially when we're talking about getting him on a second round contract anyway. But anyway, I think these are irrational conclusions to reach, and I think they're informed by ideological details that just you can't substantiate. And when you fall into that line of thinking, yeah, you're going to look at Jonathan Taylor and then look at, I don't know, uh, Javonte Williams or David Montgomery or Miles Sanders and not be able to tell the difference. Why would you? They're both crap. Neither one's any useful, right? So I happen to think that that's all wrong. I happen to think that much like Nick Chubb last year, we're going to get to next year with Jonathan Taylor, people talking about how like, oh man, look how great of a pure runner he is. He's even better than all these other guys. He's a total monster. Like basically the kind of reasoning that leads people to reject Jonathan Taylor is the kind of reasoning that led people to say Deion Lewis is better than Derrick Henry and Kareem Hunt is better than Nick Chubb. Being a truly elite runner still does matter. And there is a difference. In practice, there's a huge difference between giving a carry to someone like Jonathan Taylor and a carry like to a player like Marlon Mack. So I understand the fears that people express about like, oh, Marlon Mack's going to force a committee with Jonathan Taylor. Even if you believed that, you should have thought that's a less likely scenario upon the Carson Wentz injury occurring. You get away with giving carries to someone like Marlon Mack instead of Jonathan Taylor if it works out in both cases. So if you think that Carson Wentz makes that offense worse, then it means that the cushion, like the margin for error that you're working with as a runner, as a play caller even, gets slimmer. It means that the cost of going with an inferior player like Marlon Mack instead of Taylor goes up. And that's something that you can get away with if Marlon Mack's getting the first down just like Taylor, but he's probably not. And especially if you believe that Carson Wentz's injury is a problem, then that only becomes more the case. They're more dependent on Taylor as a result of that injury. The Quentin Nelson detail is a little concerning. I'm personally not going to care in the second round, especially. I think that the question of like whether he's worth a first rounder at this point is immaterial. He's not going there anymore. Who cares? Don't take any player around earlier than you have to. It's not insightful to me to say like he's not worth a first round pick when he's going in the second round. Now the argument is becoming, is he even worth that? And I think if you knock a player who is otherwise worth a top 5 pick, and I think that's exactly what Taylor was, over Carson Wentz's injury and Quentin Nelson's injury, and having them fall into the second, that seems like a bit much to me, especially when we don't even know that Nelson's going to miss time. It's different for an offensive lineman to manage an injury like that than it is a quarterback. You can just tape up his ankle real big and then go out there and just, do squats, do deadlifts basically in the trenches. It's a lot different than running and planting your foot and throwing the ball 40 times a game. So we'll see. I think that the Quentin Nelson injury is a reason to not take Taylor in like the top 6, assuming he was even going there in the first place, which of course he isn't. So yeah, getting like scared of Taylor at the 12th pick or so of the Quentin Nelson injury is, in my opinion, an overreaction. And yeah, it's also weird to me that people ever believe that like Carson Wentz was part of the appeal for Taylor. Like I thought Carson Wentz sucked all this time. I didn't care. I didn't have anything to do with it. Jacob Eason probably is not going to be good, but I thought Carson Wentz was definitely not going to be good. It doesn't matter to me.
So I'll point this out, at least on the NFFC format within the last 2 days, Jonathan Taylor is actually being selected at 11 overall. So back into the first round, early second. I would imagine the slide continues to fall as more mainstream fantasy people continue to talk down Jonathan Taylor. But there is this conversation that maybe you do consider it. I'm curious where your break point is. So I know you're high on Nick Chubb. He's going ahead of Jonathan Taylor. In a full point PPR, are you taking Jonathan Taylor over Austin Eckler?
I won't say every time, but probably like 6 times
all right.
out of 10 I am. I'm taking Taylor over Nick Chubb, and like me and John.
Oh, you're going Taylor over Nick Chubb. You are taking Taylor over Nick Chubb?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I love Nick Chubb. Me and John are like the original Nick Chubb guys. We were screaming
yes, you are.
the last 3 years about how everybody should be taking Nick Chubb and stop talking about how anybody else can do what Nick Chubb does, because it was never true. I'm saying now Jonathan Taylor is in an offense with more targets available than Chubb has in his. And while I happen to think Chubb is, I don't know, the best running back in the league, tied with Dalvin Cook, who's best running back in the league, something like that, I also think Jonathan Taylor is going to be close to that tier as a pure runner. A lot of the reasons that Chubb is so dominant apply to Taylor too. And in Taylor's case, there's more obvious check down opportunities in the offense, I think. Like we already saw him working well as a pass catcher last year. So obviously there's not like 60, 70 catch upside with Taylor, but with Chubb, I am worried about him finishing a year with like 30 catches, whereas I consider that Taylor's floor.
Okay. So that's interesting. I would have thought pretty slam dunk Nick Chubb over Jonathan Taylor. And I was in lockstep with you and John.
Still.
Yeah, no, I was in lockstep with you and John about Nick Chubb, and I was Jonathan Taylor last year too. And I think Jonathan Taylor is one of the best backs in the league. Absolutely. But I think I'll still take Nick Chubb ahead of him right now because there's a bit more of a safety to it. I also think it's not like Carson Wentz is going to be gone the entire year. And if Wentz is back and if he ends up only missing a couple of games, which is possible, I don't think that really hurts
Yeah.
the offense as much as people are anticipating.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters that much. I mean, Carson Wentz is not a good quarterback. He can do some things pretty well. He can make some plays here and there, but he's not a reliable player in any sense. So
But he's better than Jacob
I'm
Eason,
concerned.
right? I mean,
Maybe.
like
I mean,
he's
I don't have
better.
enough. I don't. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I have like a low opinion of them both, and it just doesn't really matter to me. And the reason it doesn't matter to me is because if they can't throw the ball, then they have to run it. If they want to run it and they want to get a first down, they got to run it with Taylor. So I just see it that much more likely that Taylor goes over 20 carries. I don't know, most games now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not most, but how do you look at that offense now and consider Taylor anything but one of the league favorites for most 20 plus carry games? Do they think they're just going to put Taylor on the bench after the first quarter? Because like, oh, we're down 9-0 now, and Jacob Eason sucks. Time to put in Naheem Hines so we can throw it more with our quarterback who sucks. I doubt it. I think you're giving Taylor the ball because he's your only good player now.
My only argument to that would be, all right, so we have the Joe Mixon factor coming into play where great, he's getting the workload, but he's inefficient with those carries. Taylor's better than Joe Mixon. I think Taylor's really good, but the
Yeah.
circumstances are pretty limiting. That's where I'm looking at with Taylor.
Mixon's talent level is overrated, and the dysfunction of the Bengals is under-acknowledged. I don't think Taylor playing for the Bengals would necessarily result in a Mixon outcome, but I do think that the Bengals situation is still worse because as much as I have certain gripes with him, Frank Reich isn't a total clown as a coach, but the Bengals are at serious risk of quitting their whole season on Zach Taylor, which I kind of surprised they didn't do last year. But anyway, I think Taylor is several magnitudes above Joe Mixon as a talent, and I think a lot of people would invite the volume connection there. I guess some people are still saying like, oh, Marlon Mack's just as good. But I think a lot of people are acknowledging like, oh, they're going to have to give him more volume now, Taylor, that is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be a wash because the efficiency is going to drop. It's like, it might. I mean, it might, the efficiency might drop. It's not necessarily going to. In fact, sometimes against certain runners, you don't want to stack the box because if you put your safeties up too far, you're not leaving the last line of defense. You're getting too aggressive, making a stop that you think you can make, but with a player like Taylor, you're more likely to be wrong than you are with other running backs. And if you are wrong, he's going 80 yards. So, like an extreme example of how this dynamic can work, someone can look at Tevin Coleman's last year at Indiana when they had this guy, Xander Diamond, playing quarterback who he wasn't a quarterback. They had no quarterbacks on the team that year. They were throwing it like 11 times a game. Every single play, there's 9 defenders in the box against Tevin Coleman. And it went horribly wrong because he kept getting these 70-yard touchdowns against teams because, they'd get him on 12 yards for 10 carries on his first 10 carries, and then they'd give up that big play over and over because they didn't have a safety to cut off that long angle on him. They would get too aggressive. You miss once, that's the touchdown cost. Like, you can't miss once against that kind of speed.
Okay. I like that comparison. I had heard it was like a way back machine talking about Jamal Lewis with the Ravens. And I was always like, okay, well, Lewis wasn't that fast to be able to break those. And I don't really recall 9 in the box with Jamal Lewis, but okay. All right. I guess I'm thinking Madden ratings. That's my problem. Well, he was a monster. I just didn't think speed was a part of that equation necessarily. Either way,
he ran like a 4.38 at 240 or something like that.
Oh man, I don't remember that
Sorry,
at all. Okay,
I'm just like a big Jamal Lewis fan, so I was just.
I know, and I maybe I shouldn't have. That's fair enough with Jamal Lewis, but it's okay. It's an interesting comparison, right? And I think some people, again, 9 in the box, automatically it's a bad thing. When you have someone explosive as Taylor or Jamal Lewis, might be a different scenario. You had mentioned the dysfunction with the Bengals, and I think it's probably a good segue to end the podcast talking about the current dysfunction that we're seeing right now. I don't think I've ever seen a unanimous just piling on from a group of people that are supposed to be more or less like piping up a certain team than what we saw with the reporters from the Bengals the past couple of days. So just to give an example, we have a pretty important context with The Athletic discussing the Bengals and how much they have struggled both wearing pads and without pads. There's been talks about Joe Burrow like taking gimpy steps back, clearly favoring his knee. And this is just the beginning of training camp. Yes, things can get ironed out, but at one point, and I was among this group, the Bengals were one of those teams that were talked about as a great stacking option for best ball purpose and everything else. How concerned are you with this? And like, what are you seeing right now with the beat writers in particular with the Bengals?
I don't know what the proper perspective is with these reports from The Athletic, but I can definitely say that I've never seen reporting like that on football practices, NFL teams anyway. I've never seen anything like that. That's not to say that we know past teams haven't had days that bad as what was depicted in that article. Maybe days that bad and every year, and we just never learn about it because media don't really report on it. And maybe the athletic reporters were kind of just taking an editorial liberty that most outlets wouldn't. I don't really know, but accusing the athletic people of embellishing or kind of otherwise misleading this portrayal of this team is at once possible, but also like a pretty, it's not like a serious accusation, but it's an accusation. And I don't know why we would lean toward that as the default likelihood. It seems to me more likely that this team that has always been mismanaged and has a coach that is one of the worst in the league and isn't respected by his players and only has his job in the first place because he married Mike Sherman's daughter. I think that team with a quarterback coming back from a 3 ligament knee tear late last season was not necessarily likely to have problems like this, but certainly more likely than other teams. And if they're failing and if they're looking disheartened and disorganized as a team, that would be just kind of what they've usually done. And Zach Taylor being there a few years now, being respected at no point, being effective as a coach at no point, his bit is probably wearing thinner than ever on the team. And it doesn't need to be in the form of the team being like, man, Zach Taylor sucks. I'm not going to work hard for that guy. It could be like everybody's kind of just getting like depressed being there, just kind of, getting a little burned out, just being a step slow because your heart isn't into it. That kind of stuff kind of piles on and the mood, weighs on you, and it's hard to escape after years of feeling like you're in it. And if everybody goes into the year with this generic optimism, but like, yeah, we got Joe, we got Jamar Chase, and these cool receivers, it's gonna be fun. We're gonna throw the ball a lot, and then you get to training camp and everything's broke, and you're just disillusioned and your faith is shattered. Like it's hard to stay focused and work hard and be as good as you can be when things like that are happening. So I feel like the practice report is probably totally accurate and that there is a problem there. But a couple things I would say. One, there is time for them to improve. I don't know how excited I am about the possibility. It's hard for me to have much faith in this team, and I absolutely, if I was in Vegas or something, I would put money on Zach Taylor getting fired this year. I am pretty much positive it's going to happen.
That's probably like minus 350 though. That's like it's guaranteed he's gonna get fired.
Oh, I mean, I just think like it is an actual guarantee rather than like a likelihood. But yeah, I think they could get better over the course of training camp. They almost have to. It sounds like they couldn't possibly get worse. So whatever. That's one thing. The other thing is though, I've seen people saying like, and this is understandable, but people are saying, oh, they should have took Penei Sewell. Joe Burrow doesn't have enough time to throw. I don't know if that matters. I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure that Burrow, coming back from that injury, was always put in this unfair position that people expecting him to be just as good as ever coming back from that. It's like, why would we believe that? That's a serious injury and it happened late last year. I have no idea why we were ever optimistic about that as like the default policy. And then, like having like the offensive line be better doesn't make the knee hold up, of course, but also Sewell's not even 21 yet. He's going to be 21 in like October. I think it's unrealistic to think he would have been better on the offensive line. But even if he were, even if Penei Sewell were Jonathan Ogden 2.0 and just absolutely shut down everything that came to the left side of that offensive line, this team probably would still look bad in that particular practice that we're talking about. Like the problems are too big to be solved by anybody, let alone the question of whether Chase or Sewell is what it all hinged on. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it really was all coming down to that pick. But I happen to think that Zach Taylor is just hopeless as a coach, and I don't see how that team plays to 90% of their potential with that guy running the team.
All right, so that's pretty damning evidence. We have some ADP talk here for Joe Burrow, at least within the last week or so, is around pick 100 in NFFC formats. I don't know where he is. Underdog, I could pull it up. But that'll put him at quarterback 13.
Like
so quarterback after Burrow would be Trevor Lawrence, Matt Ryan, and then for some reason Trey Lance has gotten all the way to that point. And I like Trey Lance, but that's a different conversation. Are you taking Lawrence over Burrow? I think that's probably a yes, I would imagine.
Yeah. I was saying that all off season, and then Lawrence just kept getting cheaper and Burrow kept getting more expensive, and I was like, why are you doing this? But yeah, I love Lawrence. I think Lawrence is gonna set the league on fire pretty much right away.
Okay, how about Matt Ryan over Joe Burrow?
Yeah, so I'm pretty low on Burrow. I think I'm probably as low on Burrow and the Bengals as anyone out there. Really, I still wouldn't take Matt Ryan over him.
Okay,
Maybe
right.
I should rethink that because Ryan's good. I just worry that he doesn't have any help there. Pitts and Ridley is all he has.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I was more optimistic on Burrow than probably most people. I was of the opinion leading the charge that Bengals stack actually was pretty affordable to do. At this point, though, that's concerning evidence. What you just talked about, I agree with you. The Zach Taylor effect, it cannot, in both ways, cannot be understated or overstated. I don't think people really truly understand how miserable of a coach he is, and if I think Taylor needs
People
to
haven't looked at it.
Well, they need to say a thank you gift to Adam
right.
Gase, right? I mean,
I would rather have Gase.
No, don't say that. You don't actually mean that.
Yes, I would. I would rather have Gase. Man, do you know how bad it was with the Bengals the past 10 years? And AJ Green, Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap dealt with all of it. They didn't say a word. And then last year, AJ Green just basically goes AWOL after 3 embarrassing games. Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap are both like, we're not playing anymore. This guy sucks. Trade us. We're not doing it. We're done. It's like, think of what they had to get put through to reach that point. Like, it doesn't, and I'm not saying like Zach Taylor's like a bad guy or a scoundrel or something. I'm saying he makes everybody depressed to play for the Bengals. And they feel like they're wasting their time and their labor and their emotional investment in this team. And it's hard to compete against, opponents who are running at 110% effort. It's like, you got to match that intensity and you have to mean it, because you can't fake it. And it's like, you're already probably the worst team to start with. You can't be running on half motor when you're already the underdog. So I don't know. I think it's just, there's a lot of rot in Cincinnati, and maybe it's not even really Zach Taylor's fault. Maybe he's just kind of been failing upward like this for reasons outside of his control. Maybe the second he became engaged to Mike Sherman's daughter, he was put on this trajectory that he couldn't stop, and it's not his fault. None of that really matters to me. I'm just saying the collapse is plainly apparent there.
Oh, that's great. And I don't really have anything else to add to it other than it'll be a situation to monitor throughout the preseason. Even if the Bengals look excellent towards the end of the year, and I'm sure after all the reports that came out, there's going to be somebody somewhere in that Cincinnati Bengals organization that says, yeah, you're going to have to make this right. Whether or not, I'm not trying to, diss the athletic guys whatsoever. I just think you never see that negative publicity so rightfully come out, and there's going to be consequences for that, whether it's true or not. So great. There's going to be some puff pieces later on. I'm definitely more skeptical of the Bengals than I was entering this weekend. And I think most people should be at this point.
Yeah, I'm interested in Mixon if he falls far enough, and Higgins and Boyd. Realistically, I'm not getting any Chase shares. I never understood why he was going ahead of Higgins in the first place. So I'm out on Burrow. I'm out on Chase. I'll be on the lookout for Higgins falling too far, Mixon falling too far. But it's definitely the volume that you're kind of buying. You're not really buying the hope of efficiency for anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that does it for us on the RotoWire Thursday edition of the NFL podcast. Again, Joe Bartle filling in for John McKechnie, Mario Puig alongside me. We'll be together again tomorrow, breaking down some SiriusXM work together, and they'll be starting the rest of the Friday editions through the season. So I'm looking forward to that. And of course, this podcast is sponsored by WinBet. I imagine John will be back, hopefully not dealing with any water-related incidents next week. So you'll have his lovely voice and analysis to break it down with you guys.